PK52, the Saturday morning meeting. All right, I promised you guys over a couple of weeks that we were going to do a series on product knowledge. And I want to break this series down, and I want to talk to you a little bit about product knowledge and how we can utilize this in 2018 and beyond. First of all, I don't know how much time a customer really is allowing a salesperson for a true walk around. I get if I want to learn about Intune, I need to spend a few minutes because I've never owned a Toyota before, so I need to find out how to be able to use my entertainment system in the car. The colors of the car, the way the cars are trimmed out with a sunroof, without a sunroof. There are things that we need to point out, but I don't know if I really call that a walk around or a product presentation or not, other than just identifying the features and the equipment on the car. A real product presentation is taking a product and applying it to the use of the actual customer. And this may not be a surprise to anybody, but I'm going to start my product series with you guys on Tundra. And I call it Top 5. We are a digital age. And I know I've said that a million times. If you come to some of the classes that I've taught, seminars, presentations, you know I keep talking about being digital. I know when a customer comes to the dealership, if they give me a few minutes, I can show them some outstanding things on every single product that we have. However, what can I do prior to the customer coming in? So how do I take my product presentation and make it be responsible for the customer actually coming to the dealership and visiting me and entertaining the thoughts of purchasing or leasing a car from me? So that is what I really want to do with digital. Let's start. On Tundra, I want to do a top 5. And I think I'm going to go through main core series vehicles and light vehicles over the next couple of weeks of the top 5 things that you should have in your phone on the core of Toyota products. You definitely should have something on Camry. We have 4-cylinder Camry, we have 6-cylinder Camry, and we have a hybrid Camry. Those 3 cars are completely different from each other, and I want to be able to entertain the customer with the facts about those 3 cars and their choices on Camry when they call up or email me or go on the internet and say, I'm interested in a Camry. So it doesn't mean one generic Camry. Every Camry is different, and an LE is different than the XSE. So the more information I can give this customer that they can utilize to make a decision, the easier my job is once they finally get to the dealership, and the more committed they are coming to me. There's a lot of times they come to the dealership and they deal with a salesperson that doesn't even really know the basics of product knowledge, and so the sale becomes price. And yeah, you've had that customer come in, they came from another Toyota store, and all they care about is price, is because that last salesperson didn't have anything to discuss about the product other than here's the features, now here's the price. So see if we can change that out, and I think you have a lot better chance of changing that prior to the customer coming in the dealership. Because once they come to the dealership, they want to know how much the car is. And I'll be honest with you, if they don't think they can afford the car, they're probably going to leave. So let's make sure the car is more valuable. And I've said this for years, when value equals selling price. It's a car deal. They really don't want to go somewhere else. They like to go ahead and buy their car and enjoy their car. So top 5 I've picked for Tundra right now, it's probably not going to be your top 5 list. There's not going to be any creature comforts on here. It's going to be selling against the other trucks. Because remember, Ford or Dodge or anybody in the GMC or Chevy lineup, our biggest selling problem is the amount of gigantic rebate they're willing to give a customer prior to the customer even asking about the truck at all. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is Tritech Frame. Let's look at it in perspective of the #1 seller. And I think the F-150 and Ford is just genius the way they market their vehicle. They have a commercial fleet unit, and they have guaranteed buybacks. I mean, I'm going to destroy this truck over the next 3 to 5 years, and Ford's going to give me a guaranteed buyback on the fleet of 200 trucks I buy for my company. That means that every single person working for that company, and a lot of people take that truck home every night, are in a Ford F-150 every single day. They know how everything operates, from the radio to the 4-wheel drive system. They know everything about the operation of that truck. So when it becomes time for them to buy a truck for their personal use, F-150. So that's genius. I'll give you another example. Back in World War II, and when we're fighting out of World War I, You look at the wars and everything, equipment becomes paramount. If your equipment doesn't work and you're in a battle, then you're in trouble. Well, think about what Harley Davidson did, you know, opening in 1903. They were the major supplier of motorcycles for the war. And they would send their mechanics over there to teach the people in the field how to repair the bike in the field. So when the soldiers came home, think about it. They knew how to repair a Harley Davidson. They rode a Harley Davidson while they were in theater, so they bought a Harley Davidson because they were familiar with the motorcycle. Same thing with Ford F-150, so don't get me wrong. The genius of having a giant fleet department is astronomical to the brand. They're loyal to the brand because they're comfortable with the brand. Interesting. Ford in the F-150 uses a fully boxed hydroform frame. And Ford claims that's the greatest frame in the history of the truck business. You know, let's dispel some myths, because if you buy a Super Duty Ford, you don't get a fully boxed frame. You get a frame that's got an open rear railing system. So if the Super Duty truck doesn't have the same frame as the F-150, there's an interesting deal. Now, a fully boxed frame is going to be extremely strong and extremely capable. You know, match that up with the military grade aluminum. I know how you guys, some of you guys feel about that. Well, then we go on to, that's a big selling point, this frame. However, by taking a frame and making it more rigid, then you have to compensate with some other things because the ride quality is going to be diminished. So what Toyota did is when they built this new truck, the truck that we're selling now, this generation Tundra, they went with two reasons. Number one, man, how in the world are we going to put all these gigantic parts on there, the biggest, heaviest duty parts in the history of the half-ton truck, and not make this thing weigh 1 billion pounds? Because the more weight you put on a truck, the worse the gas mileage. So dry weight of the truck with no load, with no towing, if the truck weighs 500 more pounds, the gas mileage is going to be lower. And so we have to look at what we can do with weight, strength, and a combo. So we went with the Tritech frame. Obviously, the number one heaviest work part of the frame is the first third. And that's a fully boxed hydroform frame. The engine sits on that, all braking inertia goes forward. So we made that so rigid so that the workability of the front of that frame is going to be unbelievable. In the middle part of the frame, well, you sit on that part of the frame. That's where the cabin is full of passengers and the driver. And so we wanted to make sure there was a little forgiveness in that part of the frame, so it's called a rolled C. So you have a C channel, and then you have reinforced metal inside the C channel. Certainly you could have taken that metal out and fully boxed it. So we have the same type of strength, but we have a little bit more forgiveness right there in the middle portion of the frame. Very strong, a little bit better ride comfort, and we saved a little bit of weight there. And in the back, an open C channel. Easier place to be able to slide in that receiver hitch in the back and bolt it on with all those big cadmium bolts, which acts like another cross member. So our receiver hitch actually goes inside the frame and actually makes another frame cross member, which makes the frame more rigid, and that's lateral sense, that turning and lateral off-road sense. So open C channel, so Tritech. So the first third, fully boxed, rolled C, open. And it's an interesting frame because now we've taken a little bit of weight off the truck, and the next thing we do is we put a gigantic 430 rear end gearing ratio. Okay, you need to do your research, but I can't do all this for you. You need to do your research. You need to look at the number one selling Ford out of their lineup, and then you need to look at what's the rear end gearing ratio in that Ford. I promise you it's not a 430. You can get a 430, you can upgrade to a 430, but your number one seller and everything are not going to have that gigantic workability rear end gearing in there. What's the downside of that? Well, obviously the downside of that is going to be gas mileage. I mean, if you increase the size of the ratio of the rear end, then you're going to decrease your fuel efficiency. If you make that rear end gearing smaller, then you're going to have better highway and city gas mileage, but the truck's not going to be able to work as much. So a customer really needs to make a decision, what is it they're buying and what are they buying it for? And then it becomes, if I'm really going to put a load in this truck, doesn't have to be every day. If I'm really going to pull a big trailer in this truck, if I'm really going to work out of this truck ever, then the bigger the rear end gearing, the more workability of the truck. So adding a giant rear end gearing ratio adds weight to the truck. Again, back to the Tritech frame. So what we've done is we've got a little bit of a dance right here trying to make this truck stay within the parameters of the half-ton truck. I mean, really think about what we've done. We've really put components on there as a 3/4 ton truck, and we're still in the half-ton truck class. Brakes, and you know, everything's based upon brakes. Real quickly, ABS, EBD, brake assist, vehicle stability control, traction control, anything with TSS, TSSP, all of these things are all done with brakes. So the first thing that Toyota does with the brakes is when we introduced this series truck, it was the biggest front rotor in the truck industry. A 13.9-inch front rotor. Bigger the brakes, simply, the more brake force you can add and the cooler the brakes will operate. The smaller the brakes, the harder they have to work, the more the brakes will get hot, creating brake fade. So bigger brakes, a lot better workability in all types of situations, whether it's trailering or off-road or whatever. We didn't stop there. On the front calipers, we used a 4-piston caliper, 4 pistons. That's 2 here and 2 here. Looking at the #1 seller in the industry, they use a 2-piston caliper, and I'm not trying to say other trucks don't stop, but what it does is it forces the pistons against the rotor, and it forces it against a fixed back plate. So 2 versus 4. 2 contact points versus 4 pistons working in the brakes. The way I describe that to the customer is I don't expect everybody to understand brake operation. I'd be foolish to think that, even people that drive trucks every day. So what I will do, I take a dollar bill out and I ask them, and I put the dollar bill against my palm, and I ask them to take 2 fingers and hold that dollar bill right against my palm, and then I pull the dollar bill out. And I said, now watch this. I said, I want you to take 2 fingers here and 2 fingers here. And I said, just turn them sideways like this, and I put the dollar bill in there. Now they got 4 pressure points. 2, now they have 4, and I try to pull the dollar out this time, and I can't pull the dollar out. And I said, your daughter has a horse, which is her life. She's 13 years old. She's got her own horse. You know, you guys trailer that horse to different events. Stopping that trailer is important because it's not only your daughter in the truck, it's her love of her life in that trailer back there. Do you want 2 or do you want 4? And it's a pretty easy deal. I can send that to you on video because guess what? I just did. 13.6-inch rotors ventilated in the back. So as a setup, as we started this truck mission of building the best half-ton truck in the history of the world, we started out with the best braking system, and nobody watching this video can't understand that. It's so important to be able to do that. And I'll add one thing to it, just technology-wise. Electronic brake force distribution. I'm going to load the back of my truck up. I know there's a payload spec, but I'm not taking 2 trips because I'm 400 pounds overweight. I'm going to put the extra 400 pounds in the back of the truck. I'm going to strap it down or not strap it down. Think about this. I'm turning a corner. I've got a load shift. The electronic brake force distribution in our trucks can feel the shift of that load and reestablish the braking prowess because of the shifting load. So these are things I want the customer to think about before they're even starting there. They may go to Chevrolet today, and a Ford today, and a Toyota today, and they may drive all the trucks. And I want you to understand, all of those trucks are going to drive like brand new trucks. They really are. And they're all good trucks. I want them to understand what they're getting long term. Coil-over front suspension. We were the first company to do that on a full-size truck. Since that point in time, Ford has copied our suspension, and I wish they'd just give us credit. You know, we found out Toyota had a better suspension and everything, so on our new model trucks and everything, we use Toyota's coil-over suspension. If you watched my truck series before, you've heard me say that. All it is the coil is over the shock on a double wishbone. The great thing about a double wishbone is it lets the tires move up and down. Anytime you have a suspension like a strut suspension, the tires work on a camber. So if I'm off-roading and I compress the truck on a jump, or I spring the truck off when I'm jumping off of a rise in the territory, the tread moves perpendicular to the ground, so it's going to be a better off-road situation. The coil can be mounted in the forward part of the suspension, which lengthens the feel of the suspension ride, which gives it a better on-ride or on-road ride quality. So lengthening that suspension at one contact point. If you have two contact points on your front suspension, then you have a tendency to have some vibration. For years, people would come back and say, you know, my GMC Chevrolet truck vibrates about 42 miles an hour, and they go, well, what do you do about that? So, well, I usually don't drive 42 miles an hour because that's when it happens. I can't even imagine if we had an inherent thing built into our truck where it had an inherent issue, how crazy the media and our customers would go after us because it's not perfect, and a Toyota basically means perfect. Last thing I'll talk about today in my top 5 Tundra is trapezoidal frame. So the frame is not straight. It's a frame that's built with what you might do with the truck. So it's a shaped frame based upon the ability to handle shifting loads, or the ability to be able to pull a trailer or to go off-road. So when you go into your resource material, it's a lot easier to see if you go to your resource material. Look at the shape of the actual frame, and that frame is set up so that we can modify some things. The next thing is the leaf springs on the frame are going to be outside the frame rails in the back. You'll go down the highway after watching this video and looking at other trucks, and you can see the shock absorbers hanging down in the middle part of the truck, hanging down below the axle. When you're driving behind a Tundra, you're not going to see the bottom of the shocks because they're flush mounted. Anytime you have one shock with the back coupling down below the axle, that's going to grab stuff off-road. Whoever designed the brackets below the axle, you know, did you not expect people to look underneath the truck and see that? Let's talk about the Dodge truck for a second. You know, Dodge in their 1500 years ago just decided, doesn't need leaf springs. We're just going to put coils on it, like on a minivan. And so the coils, or the suspension, are directly over the axle. There's no span. Having no span, when the load's going to shift. So if the load shifts forward or back, I don't have that span of that leaf spring to be able to balance out the load. So I'm not saying that the Ram 1500 series doesn't ride like a car and it doesn't have a great road ride, because it does, because it's got a car suspension on it. So we stayed with a leaf spring. Our leaf spring is not straight. Our frame is not straight. Our leaf spring is towed out toward the cab of the truck. So it gets narrower as it goes in the back. Everybody knows, it's ever driven a truck before, if you stop, all the inertia goes forward, and if your load's not secure, your load goes forward. Well, watch what happens. The load goes forward to the widest part of the leaf spring. Is this genius or what? The shocks are outside the leaf springs. The wider the shock absorber, the more balance laterally the truck's going to have. One of the shocks runs this way, and the other shock runs this way. So now the shocks are tagonistic and antagonistic. They work with each other for lateral movement. It's like the biceps on your arms and the triceps on your arm. Biceps pull it this way, triceps pull it this way. But if you flex both of those muscles at the same time, your arm doesn't move. Great example of the way we run the shocks in the Tundra. So my top 5: Tritech Frame, big huge 430 rear gear, 13.9s on the front brake, 13.6 on the back brakes, coiled over front suspension, and trapezoidal frame with a modified leaf spring. This has been PK52, your top 5 to send to your customers. Talk about trucking before they ever come in. The Saturday morning meeting.